I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your cattle market summary for the week ending October the 19th, brought to you in part by Nutra Beef Safeguard Dewormer Mineral. Deworming doesn't have to be hard on your cattle. Integrate Nutra Beef Safeguard Dewormer Mineral into your existing program to deliver an all-in-one dewormer and free choice mineral that's broad spectrum, proven effective, and ready to save you time and money. There's no corrals, no chutes, and no trailers. It's deworming done right. Bullish Cattle on Feed report ended the week last week, and kind of a topsy-turvy week with your cash feeders starting out lower with all the weather concerns and muddy conditions and just dreary cold kind of weather, and then just sheer numbers of calves hitting the market, affecting both the price for them and for the bigger and older yearlings. But the weather straightened out as we went through the week, and it was good pretty much all week in the northern plains. But then that clearness and the sunshine and warmer conditions kind of worked their way further south and ended up helping the market on all the cattle. Another week of pretty much steady fats, but on Friday the Bullish Cattle on Feed report was a surprise, and I do expect it to be a major impact on the market this coming week. We should be up nearly the limit on your futures markets, and should be sharply higher on all your cash cattle too. But look at your Cattle on Feed report that come out on Friday. Your October 1 inventories, the average guess or the estimate on those was 106.3, but your actual NAS quote was 105.4, which is still a big number, but it really doesn't matter what that number it is. It's just what it is in comparison to what they thought it was going to be. Your placements turned out to be 95.4, and that was in comparison to the average of the analyst guess of 100.3. That is major bullish. It's the first time we've seen a placement number that was less than year-ago figures for a long time. It's like the second time in 21 reports that it's been less, and it was significantly less than what the average of the analysts thought, and should be a major bullish quote on there. Your marketings for fat cattle through the month of September turned out to be 96.4, and very close to what the guess was of 96.5. So we should be gangbusters at least here early in the week before something bad happens that causes things to spoil. But let's look at the board for last week. Your October live cattle futures on Monday up $1.05, Tuesday was down 72, Wednesday up 27, Thursday up 15, and Friday down 82 cents, with your October live cattle futures contract ending the week at 112.25, which was 7 cents lower than the previous week. So a lot of juking and jiving around, and only lost 7 cents for the week. That's not too bad. December live cattle futures ended the week at 116.77, which was up 60 cents for the week. October feeder cattle, Monday was up 40 cents, Tuesday down $1.07, Wednesday was up a nickel, and Thursday up 117. Friday down 60 cents, with October feeder cattle contracts ending the week at 154.65, which was down a nickel for the week. Not too bad. November ended the week at 154.10, down 52 cents for the week. Your fat cattle trade, we kind of feared that all week long, that we weren't going to be able to get any better than steady. And as the week ended, it was just good enough to continue to call it steady. It was steady in your live price in Kansas and the Southern Plains. That's usually where we establish the market there when they all move there. But in the Northern Plains, in Iowa and Nebraska, they had sold cattle a pinch lower than that, and a pinch lower than the previous week, 109 and 110. And so even though your market never really got established up there, you could call it steady weak, I guess, because it was steady at best, but you know, there's a lot of reasons you could call it a little bit lighter too. But on your dress trade, it was about steady, 173 to 175, and a lot of 174, and that 175 was late in the week, just on some precious deals there as your packers were trying to get all the cattle that they needed to get bought for the week, and a few holdouts that they really wanted, they'd step up and give a 175 for, and actually saw a little bit of 111 and a half in a few places. But through Thursday, 78,300 head in your 5-area feeding region. 19,300 of those were on Thursday. The bulk of the trade moved on Wednesday, but we had cattle sales every day of the week. Your live price on the 5-area feeding region, weighted average steers, 109.96, so just under 110. So it's really hard to call that a 111 market when it's not even 110 because of the Northern Plains selling so many cattle off the market. But if you look at the heifer weighted average, it was 110.34, and you guys that are scared to feed heifers, look at that. Your heifers always grade better because they're lighter muscled. Anytime you get lighter muscle carcasses, they have a better chance to marble and a better chance to grade choice or better. That's why a lot of times your plainer cattle end up grading better than what you think, and a lot of your dairy cattle grade a lot better than you think, and you see so many primes on light muscled animals like jerseys and things. But the price difference between plainer type cattle and heifers compared to steers is really wide whenever they're light, because they don't gain quite as well. But as they get bigger and bigger and closer to the knife, that discount between your best steers at walk and then your plainer cattle or your heifers just continues to narrow until the day they're ready for market, and then there's no difference at all. And like I said, if you hang them on the rail, especially, a lot of times your heifers will bring more. But on your dress trade, your dress steer weighted average was 173.89, so just under 174, but that's going to be real close to what the weighted average was for the previous week. And now we get to look forward to another shot in the arm, and if we continue with a little better weather around, we should see you know, your fat cattle deal move up too, but your feeders should sure move up this week. Box beef cutout values made a strong gains late in the week last week, so that's another positive. And even for the average trade of last week, the whole week together, they were quite a bit higher, and then were higher yet at the end of last week. But your average trade for last week on choice carcasses, 205.74 for your box beef cutout. That was up $3.06. For the weighted average compared to the previous week's weighted average. That's very significant. Your select average trade for last week was 192.44, up 23 cents. We're seeing that choice select spread grow again now as people are going towards your better cuts, your better product, up to $13.30, and 630 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings, which is about normal. Your slaughter for last week was disappointing, especially later on in the week, 625,000, and I think maybe your packers were just kind of scrambling for cattle, especially in the Southern Plains. But 625,000, that was 14,000 less than the previous week and just 8,000 less than the same week a year ago. We talked about the board. We talked about your fat cattle market. One thing that we didn't talk about is there's about 200 delivery tenders that are floating around out there. We're in the spot month of October. You can deliver cattle if you've got short hedges on those cattle, and you know, a lot of people tendered those cattle thinking that nobody would want them, and then they could reclaim them. Which is a bonus for them, but a penalty for the people that were delivered upon. And they thought they would pick up a little bit of money there, help them out with their closeouts. But now that we've seen this bullish cattle on feed report, and everybody is real excited about the near-term future for this market and the long-term future for this market, and your out front board is quite a bit higher than what we're seeing right now, probably those people that are going to be delivered upon will decide that they want to take those cattle. So some of those guys that have shorted cattle on there and decided to deliver, thinking they were just going to make a quick buck there, might have to come up with some cattle that are deliverable, and then those people that get delivered upon most likely take those cattle live. They'll take them back to a feedlot somewhere, put another 30, 45 days on them, hope the market comes to them and they don't have a lot of shrink and make those cattle get off feed. Sometimes the stress and everything from going through a delivery process can take those cattle off feed, and then it's hard to get them going again. And it ends up not working. But there'll be some guys try it, and I guarantee you there's going to be a lot of deliveries happen this coming week. Cash feeders, they started the week out lower. I talked about the weather problems, cold and miserable and just muddy everywhere, and nobody wanted any calves. And then a lot of calves coming to town. Well, we talked about how there's always at least 1 week in October where the supply outweighs demand. That happened last week on your calves. And I talked about the quote for the week was the only guys you could send calves to were guys that didn't have any calves yet. The ones that had already had some calves were sick of the ones that they had because of sickness and mud, and they didn't want any more of them, so you had to find some new holes to stick them in. But that pressure, and with the weather the way it was and everything, that weighed upon your yearling cattle too, not just your calf prices. But as we went along through the week, things started drying out a little bit in the northern plains. Nebraska had some nice weather. The Dakotas had some nice weather. It moved down into Kansas. They started having some nice weather. Texas was just absolutely flooded out last week. Just was down in South Texas last week and just watched those $100,000 boats that was sitting on Horseshoe Bay and places like that near Marble Falls, Texas, and they were just going off the edge of the dam just like toys. And in fact, they had a lost and found for $100,000 boats there late in the weekend, as they were having people, if you've lost your $100,000 boat, come down here and pick one out, and maybe we'll match some serial numbers up and you can get it back, what's left of it anyway. But that started drying up and healing up. We had a good sale down there in Carrizo Spring, Texas on Santa Gertrudis cattle on Saturday. The weather was beautiful. Everybody had a good time. So that all the weather problems started straightening themselves out, and then late in the week some of your feeder cattle auctions were actually higher and gained ground. Your real-time index on Beef Market Central late in the week ended at 154.38 based on the 800-pound steer, and that was actually $1.41 higher than the previous week. And those cash feeders ended the week, those yearling feeders, $1 to $3 higher. Now the calves, just the sheer volume of calves hitting the market, $3 to $5 lower, maybe steady on some really fancy reputation long strings, but for the most part your calf run was sure $3 to $5 lower, as you can just only choke so many of them, and there wasn't enough dry places to put them. There wasn't enough places that didn't have overflowing hospital pens and guys having trouble with those calves really undergoing a lot of stress. Most of them were unweaned right as they found new homes, and just the stress of it and the weather change that they weren't ready for was just too much for everybody. But let's look at some quotes there late in the week. St. On, South Dakota had a big sale on Friday. 7,100 head there. We just recently picked them up on Cattle Market Central. We're really glad to have them. They quoted the calves mostly steady there compared to the previous sale, the previous Friday. But look at a quote here on some big steer calves. 165 head of steer calves, weighed 709 and 172 and a quarter, and you'd be hard pressed to get that for a good green thin yearling most places, let alone calves. But now look at a quote we don't always see, but some import cattle, and that's the kind of cattle that you see come into the Texas Panhandle, a lot of southwest Kansas areas, those places like to straighten up and they like to graze light Mexican cattle when you can find them, and they're hardier than a lot of cattle you can find. They're cheaper than some of those northern cattle. They don't melt on you. A lot of them may be close to a year old, weighing in the fours, but you know, they're just got a lot of compensatory gain, and you can't hardly kill one of them. You know, if they've been getting by on nibbling on a cactus down there and hard to find a puddle of water to drink out of, when you get them and give them a good home, it works pretty good. And a lot of the southeast sale barns shipped in cattle, guys out west having a lot of trouble with them, and they have trouble with them getting to respond to medicine. They have trouble getting them on feed, and a lot of places in the southeast have started pooling their cattle. Some operations are getting bigger, and a lot of those better cattle are staying there, and they're adding weight to them, adding value to those cattle. And some of the cattle that you get, not all of them, but some of the cattle that you get shipped to you may not be the best of the cattle they have on offer, and hence you got better demand for some of these Mexican cattle. Santa Teresa Livestock Auction, Santa Teresa, New Mexico. That's where they cross most of the live Mexican cattle, and they have a sale barn sits right there now, and all the cattle that go through that sale are Mexican cattle coming into the United States. But 82 head of pretty plain, and plain for Mexican cattle, mixed steers. They'd be just what you're thinking about on Mexican types. 82 head of them. I'm sure they were thin and gant, but 444 pounds, bring $182. That's nothing to sneeze at. But that's a look at your cattle markets for last week from a home DV auction office here in Canyon, Texas. We'll talk to you next week.